So Justin and I have the distinct pleasure of talking to you guys about a very serious topic like data and scaling the business right after you've eaten a nice carbohydrate-heavy meal. So please try and stay awake. I wish I had candy and sugar to give you guys. All right, so let's go through what I'm going to talk to you guys about today. But before I do that, I actually am going to introduce myself. The last session, we had someone in here who was asking about, can't hear. Got it. Can you hear now? All right. The last session we were in here, and the last gentleman was talking about customer success hiring, and people were raising their hands. I've been in customer success for 3 years, for 5 years, for 10 years. He said, anybody 20 years, and he didn't see me, but I was the only one with my hand up. I've been doing this for about 20 years. Before customer success was customer success, I tell people this all the time. Michael Bledsoe, if any of you guys know him, I spoke at his conference a couple of months ago, and I call myself one of the OGs of customer success because we've been doing it so dang long. And I do it because I love it. I do it because I love the people that work in this kind of environment and profession. I love it, and I love customers. So a little bit background about me. I've been in companies anywhere from 45 employees, so little tiny startups where you're wearing 15 different hats, to 65,000. I was at WebEx when we were acquired by Cisco. Anywhere from 95 customers to 47,000 customers, and the 47,000 customers is what you care about while you're here in terms of scaling your business. So there are some of the logos that I've been at, and my bad PowerPoint at the back end because they're covering that. But before we get into why we scale business, let's talk about the state of our nation, quote unquote, profession. You heard the speakers in the keynote recently say that focus continues to be on new business, despite the fact that we know usually the cost to retain a customer is significantly less than the cost to acquire a customer. When I was at WebEx, it was $11,000 to acquire a new customer. And yet it was a couple $1,000s for us to keep them after year 2. And if you think about $11,000, if you sell a $1,000 customer, that means you're not making your money back until the 11th month. And so it doesn't make sense that we don't start to work on this customer experience and continue to put some dollars around it. But then it gets very expensive, hence the reason why all of you guys are here, as we start to look at why the heck would we actually do that. So I have a funny little story about this. There's a Chief Customer Officer Summit that happens every year. There's about 100, 150 people that go there, and we're sitting in a group of about 12, 13 people, and all of us were sitting there because we wanted to understand how to work with this long tail of customers. And the moderator said, hey, does anyone put people around this? And I was the only leader who put my hand up. And they said, all of them looked at me like I was crazy and said, why? And I said, because even if you can maintain the retention, which most customer success individuals are here for, if you maintain the retention, and even if they don't really grow that much, they are your outside sales force. They are your referenceability. They're the people who are going to go talk to everybody else about how great your product is. And so if you neglect them and don't put anything around them, then suddenly you're doing yourself a disservice because you're getting customers who are paying you to go get more customers. It doesn't make any sense. But if we think about retention, referenceability, usually most of us who started in customer success, certainly 20 years ago, we're kind of squishy-hearted people. We care about what the customer is doing, how successful they are, whether they're quote-unquote happy and satisfied. And it's hard for us to get our minds around this thing that everyone is talking about today, which is data, 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 data. And so if I look back at my experience, my very first customer success was a company called Examine, which was acquired by LexisNexis, so I can't find their logo anymore. For me, when they talked about retention, it was I knew our main contact at Allstate, who was 75% of our business. I knew his phone number, his family, his kids, his dog's name when they went on vacation. That was retention. Because he loved me so much, he would stay. That still does exist to some extent in our environment right now, but usually only with those very big customers. I had the same thing with Coca-Cola when I was at Hightail. But now we look at data, and especially when you're scaling the business, you have to look at data. What's your customer success metrics? Not yours, because yours don't matter. It's the customers that matter. I was in a session earlier today when they were talking about that customer orientation and whether they're actually healthy or not themselves. So what's their quantifiable success metrics? Not that this feels good, but what are they doing? And then how do we help them progress? I tell people all the time, my main job as a customer success professional is actually to make all of my clients look like rock stars in their organization, because that's when they're going to actually stay with you. And then how likely is that customer to renew? And we know when we start to move from relationship into data, that you're increasing renewal rates, and that's what most of us are here for. But if you move away from the relationship, does that mean you're actually turning your back on the customer? Absolutely not. That means you're getting more intelligent about how you actually work with your customer. So let me tell you my WebEx story, because I mentioned that we were acquired by Cisco. I started in WebEx in 2003. This is why I get to call myself an OG. And we were doing nothing but customer success. We have about 200 customer success managers there to about 550 or so sales reps. In 2004, about 6 months after I'd walked in, my boss walked into me and said, I got 2,500 customers and 5 CSMs, and I need you to figure out how to scale this business. And I said, you're crazy. There's no way I'm going to do that. That's not what I want to do, because everybody wants the glory of working with enterprise customers like Coca-Cola who have 50,000 licenses. And that doesn't feel like the right thing to do for customers. And he said, you're the only person who can do it. Give it 6 months. In 2009, I left that organization. We had 47,000 customers in my base, and it was $81 million worth of WebEx's business. We'd been acquired by Cisco in the meantime. We had 15 CSMs here in the US and 17 in Bangalore, India. And those 17 in Bangalore, India came to me at a rate of about 3 to 1 for US CSMs. So I talked to my boss right before he left and went to Sonos. And I said, help me understand the value of what we just did. It does feel like it's right, but help me understand. And he said, for every 150 customers, we would have put a CSM around that. And so if you start to divide that out, even though there's some smaller customers we would have not done anything with, that's 235 CSMs we would have needed for this organization, and you did it with 32. That's why it's important. And that was the point at which I had this epiphany of like, okay, I have got to figure out how to get this done. So now that you know that, we'll talk a little bit about Glassdoor and why I'm here. How many of you guys know Glassdoor? Okay, someone want to be brave enough and tell me what they think Glassdoor does? Because it's important you understand this before I go on. Salaries. Anybody else? Reputation reviews, okay. So Glassdoor, our mission is to help people everywhere find jobs and company they love, and one of my managers is in the office in front of me, and he's giggling because we go through this every day. Glassdoor started out as a job applicant consumer, or what we call user service, but has since moved into what we call our go-to-market organization. And our go-to-market organization is we sell to employers. We sell the brand to employers, so when you go out to Glassdoor, you can buy that brand and do some things with it, make it more beefed up. We also sell display advertising, so homepage highlights and things like that. So when you go to the Glassdoor site, it doesn't actually have a Glassdoor logo. It has maybe Southwest or something like that. People have purchased that advertising. The thing we are, though, very known for is jobs. So if you think about Indeed, Monster, those kind of things. So people come to us to post their jobs to get the best applicants. And the reason why Glassdoor is better than some of the other services is that we provide quality, informed candidates. You go to Indeed, you just see a job, and then suddenly you're applying for the job. At Glassdoor, you do all the research. It's salaries and culture and benefits and everything else before you apply. So that's what we feel like is our value. So if you think about that from my perspective and where I work, I walked in just over a year ago, 13, 14 months or so, and the Glassdoor story was that they treated all their customers the same. And my CEO and founder said, how the hell do I scale this business? I can't do this. It's growing at a rate of about 65% in cost, and that was way too much. And so we looked at the CSM model and said, CSMs have anywhere from 90 to 350 accounts, and you know when you have 350 accounts, you're not a CSM, you're a support rep. That's the truth. We didn't scale and operationalize because we were growing so fast. Glassdoor has been a great business and has done a lot, but that meant that we didn't take care of what we needed to, and to retain our customers, we needed to figure out how to scale and operationalize. What you're looking at in front of you is the result of not scaling and operationalizing our business. That's our retention. And when you look at the top, it goes down from here: agencies, enterprise, mid-market, SMB. And you see they're converging. I'd never seen that in my 20 years worth of career. And it's because we had grown so fast and not put the right things in place. And so we looked at that and went, okay, if this is what's happening, what's our customer success purpose? And for us to scale the business, we need to first figure out what that actually was. And so based on this, we went, okay, we've got to help retain customers. That's where we need to be. And in retaining customers, you get more referenceable customers. But that didn't tell me anything until I started digging a little bit more into the data. And you can see in front of you, I had one of our data specialists, we've been blessed to have those at Glassdoor, that there are 6 different factors that caused retention within our customer base about a year ago. They were awareness, delivery, jobs, review quality, ATS issues, and then difficulty in hiring. 4 of those things my team could affect. They could affect the awareness, delivery, jobs, and the ATS issues by making sure we got them right. The top 2, awareness and delivery, accounted for 50% of our issues with churn. So if I could put a team around just dealing with that 50%, then I already had a win. So here's what we did. We looked at what was in the awareness and the delivery. And what I try to do when I put together what I call customer enablement teams, is Carly in here? I thought she was going to come. Carly is one of our, used to be customer enablement managers. She's here at the conference today. She started the team and went through this process of how do we figure out how to work with customers. The unfortunate thing in working with retention is that it often are bad calls, right? You don't want to talk to somebody who's very unhappy, and so you've got to balance it with something that's really good. So what I did was stack the retention with the manager. Incomplete implementations cause us issues all the time. Zero reduced jobs on Glassdoor, so their campaigns went down. Campaign pace rates, instead of a health score, we have a pace. And so that's a pace rate. Jobs utilization or availability, we have a subscription product, and so if they weren't utilizing all 10 of the slots that they purchased, then we need to do something about that. And then I always consider my teams to be the support, enhancement, or escalation. And so they have all of those from a CTA perspective or calls to action perspective. But what we also did was balance it with a net promoter. And net promoter, we gave them the good clients, the nice clients. I take the really bad ones, Dan takes the ones in the middle, and then the CSMs get the great ones of saying, hey, thank you so much. And what we're doing to work on the more nice stuff is EP logins or our employer profile logins per month, increase in star ratings, anniversary dates, things like that. So we balance those two things, but you have to watch the volume. So here is one of our sample dashboards because you can't build a scalable team unless you give them some way to do this. And way back then, when I was at MindJet, my first job down here in the Bay, we used Salesforce to do this, and I was friends with Salesforce folks, and they taught me how to put in a success plan and everything in Salesforce, but man, these applications are much easier than Salesforce is. So this is our dashboard for our CEMs, and it literally is the campaigns that are down, the cases that are in implementation, the My Accounts that have open CTAs, and then the essential slots and jobs utilization are sponsored. And so CEMs log in every day, and this is what they look at. They go and they say, okay, I've got that many CTAs open, and those blacked out parts, by the way, are customer names. They go in here and they go, okay, I'm going to go down the list and do what I need to do. They get fired on average about 5 to 7 CTAs a day because we want to make sure that they give enough time to those. And so a jobs utilization conversation may be more than just you don't have enough jobs. It may end up being an ATS conversation and a whole bunch of other complicated conversations. I'm going to skip past this one really fast, but this is the manager dashboard, and this is because I didn't redact out the employees' names. So manager walks in and she does the same exact thing. She looks at her dashboard every day and says what needs to be done by each one of the team members to make sure that we're getting what we need to do. End result of all of that, putting that in place, and so we did that last April, and I just checked the churn rates and the utilization rates. The increase in the utilization in this space alone has been 7 points, and that was as of December. It went up another 8 points in January. And so we're 15 points up in terms of utilization. That's huge. Now that's a direct correlation to this team actually doing their job. It's harder to say that the logo retention went up by an X percent because of this team, but it definitely was one of the things that actually helped them get to that point. And so logo retention went up 2 points during this time frame. That's huge because it equates to millions of dollars every point that we move that. So here are some other learnings, because you always want to go to the data and then you want to go to the soft learnings. I affectionately call customer success managers cat herders, by the way, because your job is not to actually solve all the issues. Your job is to find someone to solve the issues and make sure you're following up to get them solved. So these are the other things that this team was able to start looking at and solve. We had the staffing vertical in this CEM base. That vertical effectively doesn't work like any other customer that we have, and so we literally had to take one of the team members and put that team member on nothing but staffing because of that. We figured out that the lack of true onboarding was an issue and causing retention in the long run. Those incomplete implementation cases were a problem. We also figured out recently that our support team that we put in place at the same time could actually take some of these issues that were being escalated to the CEM so they could continue to work on the data that was sent to them as opposed to answer questions from sales and things like that. This lack of tools has led to a problem for us. And so if any of you guys are in media, part of our business is in media, and so they're changing cost per clicks and budgets and things like that on a regular basis. That level of customer does not belong in this space. It's too difficult to deal with. Product changes make adoption much easier. When I came in, we implemented a self-serve way to implement customers. And so some customers are using that now, and we're pushing that even further. Segmentation, when you start to look at this customer base, you start to realize that there are some that you don't really need to put people around. But you have to get the learnings before you can jump to that point. You really do have to. So some of these customers can actually just go to marketing support via email nurture and webinars and things like that. And then the other thing, ironic that the person in front of me was talking about jobs in CSMs. Last time I looked at the Totango survey, there were 95% of the people who are calling themselves CSMs who were not CSMs for the last 3 years, that they jumped in from sales, consulting, professional services, these different areas. CEM, customer enablement, is a great starting point for a CSM position. And so someone who really is passionate about the customer but has not been doing this before can step into this position, start orienting themselves around risk mitigation and how to use data and how to have conversations with customers with very little risk. Because the customers in this space are $6,000, and if I lose a $6,000 customer because you didn't say the right thing, okay, fine, I lost you. It's not going to kill me. So that's our outcome and learnings from that perspective. So I have one more slide, and it's just key takeaways, because they tell you to do that every time you do a presentation for them. So if you follow these 6 simple steps to get to scalability, so be clear about your team's purpose. Really understand what you're here for and what you should be doing. Don't mix them. It's either growth or retention, or it's the customer satisfaction, because then it gets to be too much. Understand the data as it relates to your purpose, and do purposeful segmentation as a result of that. We looked at our base and said anything under $20,000 because we couldn't get to the other metric I wanted to get to. Now we know that that was not necessarily the right thing to do. So we'll go back and make changes to that. We take out the agency clients, we take out the media-based clients, those kind of things. Stop and think about which data points your team can really influence. The worst thing you can do is give them things to work on that they really don't have any control over or can't influence, and then they get called to the carpet and they had nothing to do with it. And so for us, it was really about the awareness and the delivery. They could influence whether someone had enough jobs in there or not, or whether the campaigns went down and got back up very quickly. Determine the appropriate base size for your team. My team started out at about 450 accounts each. They're up to about 550. I have done this where one person has had 1,600 accounts, and it's totally doable, but you have to be very clear about your purpose and what they're supposed to be doing. Implement a workflow process that supports that. Do not expect them to do this manually. There's no way they possibly can. And then evaluate the impact and then iterate. I am constantly going back to the manager and saying, what about this? What about this? What about this? And so this team, although they started a lot on risk mitigation, and is now moving to an onboarding function, because that's causing a lot of the issues for the smaller base of customers. They're not implementing and they're not onboarding. So we learned that through the last part of this process. So that's how I scale my business. Questions? I talk quickly. Yeah.
When will the deck be made public?
I have no idea, but if you give me your information, I'll give it to you. Yeah. Usually it takes them a month or so, I think. Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
How does the purpose and vision differ for someone that's managing 1,600 accounts versus someone?
Well, when someone's managing 10 accounts, it's all about the overall holistic relationship, right? So when I walk up to a CSM and I say, hey, what about Amazon? My expectation is that person understands who the contacts are, what their role is in the organization, what their goals are, what their retention rate looks like, all their metrics and everything else, and what's the plan. I was in here earlier, and there was someone who was talking about account management and CSMs actually having a co-service plan. I have always done that when I put in place bigger accounts. We're still not at that place in Glassdoor because we're still trying to get their account bases down. But when I have someone who has a very small amount of accounts, the responsibility is also co-own that to the extent to which you have a plan around them. What are the risks? What are the upsell opportunities, and who owns what, and how are you driving that? When you look at someone who has 1,600 accounts, it really is just that one single purpose. So it's about, for him at Hightail, it was about retention. And it was about making sure, because we were not on auto renew, the first thing he did was get every single one of the customers on auto renew, because that helped us out from the perspective of we didn't have to deal with the reactivity or like chasing a customer around for a renewal. So be very specific about what you're trying to get them to do when you have that many accounts. Yeah, thank you.